Hello everyone, my name is Bob Johnston. Thank you for tuning into this talk. In this study we assessed nearshore pollution using Mussel Watch, and the tissue residue data showed that PAHs were a major contaminant of concern. So this talk takes a look at the PAH distributions to identify likely sources of PAH pollution in Sinclair and Dyes Inlet. This work is part of an environmental investment partnership among the Navy, EPA, Ecology, the Suquamish Tribe, and other stakeholders to improve the environmental quality of Sinclair and Dyes Inlets. This is the Salish Sea as seen from the International Space Station on March 11th, 2020. So if you were in the Puget Sound or Salish Sea region about a year ago, you were probably in this picture. I'm located here in Bremerton, in Sinclair and Dyes Inlets, which are the ancestral home of the Coast Salish peoples and the Suquamish Tribe, and currently home to a diverse multicultural community. This shows Sinclair Inlet as seen from eyes over Puget Sound on June 24th, 2014. So the Navy's mission is to defend the nation, which includes protecting the environment and assuring the health and safety of workers. The Navy is committed to continuous process improvement by implementing best management practices. Therefore, monitoring data are essential to determine what the problems are, whether corrective actions are effective, and if the taxpayers are getting the best bang for their buck. If we want to know how well we're doing, we should ask the animals that live here. The Mussel Watch network was established in 2010 and has been sampled every other year through 2020. So the stations include worst case as well as reference sites, and we also get a seafood sample from that's harvested from Penn Cove out on Whidbey Island. So here's the pH data, and you can see that at some of the sites in the shipyard and other areas, PAHs were elevated. When we see elevated PAHs in the mussel tissues, it indicates that they were in close proximity to a source. The results were variable. Some sites exceeded the critical body residue benchmark, and all sites were above the seafood. In this study, we analyzed 20 parent PAH compounds and 22 alkylated PAH compounds. Major sources of PAHs include combustion byproducts or pyrogenic PAHs, or petroleum or petrogenic PAHs. Fingerprinting techniques usually involve some sort of source characterization, which was not possible in this study because the PAHs are already accumulated in the tissues of the mussels. Therefore, we used empirical data from mussels that were exposed to a diesel spill in Penn Cove and creosote piling removal in Commencement Bay to evaluate the patterns in our data. So what do PAHs accumulated from a diesel spill look like? Well, this is what happened in Penn Cove in May of 2012, and the samples were taken before and a month and 2 months after the spill, and we saw there was really no change in the parent concentrations of phenanthrene and dibenzothiophene, but a large increase in the alkylated components after the spill. Now, creosote pilings can last decades, providing habitat with little or no environmental impacts. However, deteriorating pilings can come apart, releasing PAH compounds. And this is what happened in Commencement Bay. So there were samples taken before the creosote piling removal project started, and then as the project progressed, very high levels of phenanthrene, fluoranthene, and pyrene were accumulated in the mussel tissues at the site. So this is the site with the highest sum of PAHs, and we can see that there was a combination, some PAHs from a petrogenic fuel origin. They were predominantly pyrogenic with a very strong creosote signal and a high percentage of very hydrophobic PAHs, suggesting a sediment source. This site was sampled before creosote piling removal, and there was a very strong creosote signal and a strong pyrogenic signal. After the creosote piles were removed and replaced, and 2 years later the mussels were sampled again, we saw a dramatic improvement after the source of PAHs had been removed. This is a sample located in Clam Bay, and there's a combination of PAH sources. We see a fuel origin for the lighter weight, a large pyrogenic component, a creosote signal, as well as high percentage of hydrophobic PAHs, suggesting sediment source. This is a site in Liberty Bay, and this site shows a fuel or diesel type of signal with these lower weight PAHs, although not completely, because we don't see the dibenzothiophene signal. Well, what are the mussels telling us about PAHs in Sinclair and Dyes Inlet? PAH concentrations were elevated at many sites. Pyrogenic PAHs accounted for the majority of the PAHs accumulated. Creosote was implicated as a source of the highest PAHs. Relatively high 5 and 6 ring PAHs suggest sediment exposure. Petrogenic sources were associated with lighter weight PAHs, and the diesel pattern was evident in 2 samples. Okay, thank you very much.